keep in the back of your mind that no family is perfect. Kids will use screens too much sometimes, and other times you might be too restrictive. And the real goal is balance and be ready to forgive yourself and forgive your kids when they sneak their devices behind your back. But but having a lot of kind of forgiveness and grace in this process will be good for everyone involved.
Welcome to the Healthy Screen Habits Podcast. I'm Hillary Wilkinson. Whether you're starting your parenting journey with a newborn or looking to connect with your teen on technology, let's learn some new healthy screen habits together. My guest today is a dad of 4 who definitely understands the complexities of parenting with healthy boundaries around screen time. As a licensed child and adolescent psychologist at Children's Nebraska in Omaha, he has practical tips that can empower families to create a balanced approach. And today we get to hear some of them. Welcome to Healthy Screen Habits, Dr. Ashley Harlow.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to get into it. As data 4, you got lots of practice.
Oh my gosh, not much sleep, but lots of practice.
Yeah. So, Dr. Harlow, you have made pediatric and adolescent mental health your life's work. Using this sort of broad scope of your career, are there changes that you have seen in kids or child development during your career?
Absolutely. I would say that I've absolutely seen changes. I've been a practicing psychologist now for 14 years here in Nebraska. And, it's a little bit of a funny question because I think about the increases in school shootings and the development and expansive use of social media, as well as like a global pandemic plunked right down in the middle of that time. And one thing that I always find striking is thinking about how resilient kids are. And so it's easy to focus on kind of problems and increasing rates of mental health symptoms. But I also find it striking and really important to consider how kids have been able to survive through all the things that they have been through. I think
Mm.
one nice thing about Children's Nebraska is they do a great job keeping data on rates of depressive symptoms and suicidal ideation and those kinds of things. And we're definitely seeing increases in those domains, that kids are struggling more with things like anxiety and things like depression. I was really excited to be a guest on your show because I also feel like it makes me feel a little bit like an old man, but I also have a sense of kind of the way technology has taken over kids' lives. And I think about even as I started at Children's in 2010, the number of kids on smartphones, the number of kids with Instagram accounts, TikTok has graced the world in the scope of that time. And thinking about the ways that kids are so engaged in that technology and their screens and these devices has really had a very significant impact, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I could not agree with you more. I was struck by the Pew Research Center in 2022 came out with kind of a list of concerns of parents. And at that point in 2022, 4 in 10 US parents said that they're extremely or very worried about their children struggling with anxiety and depression. And you pointing out the role that you have seen kind of in the field where technology plays alongside of this, I think underlines the importance of the work that you're doing, as well as the importance of collecting that data,
Mm-hmm.
because it's without it, we just become kind of a bunch of hand wringers on the side. We need those numbers, as hard as they are to collect.
Mm-hmm. No, I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right. And the I think that the way you phrase that is really important too, that the development of the technology and development of social media is happening in tandem to these trends, and that we're still trying to figure out and kind of disentangle how they're related. that if
Mm-hmm.
how the technology is causing or just correlated with some of these outcomes.
Right, right. When you talk about the very young in early child development, there's a friend of ours at the Screen Time Action Network, Jean Rogers, has a saying that I like, and I wonder if you agree with. She says, technology changes, but child development does not.
Mhm.
So it's like, how do you feel about that statement? At least with the very young, I kind of feel like it holds true.
I think it absolutely holds true. I mean, when I was in graduate school and getting my training, we talked about how all behavior is determined by an interaction of genetic and environmental factors. And when we talk about child development, that we have all the genes we're ever going to have, and all the genetic contributors to child development are here, right, and
Yeah.
with us. And I think that there can be some minor changes along the way, but those happen over thousands of years, not over the scope of time that technology is changing. So I think it's true that child development is here to stay, and the environment around us is changing at an incredibly rapid pace.
Right, right. It's hard for me to keep up with. So,
Mhm.
which should not be a surprise, but it's, so I kind of think of adolescence as this it's sort of known as this time that kids start to pull away and establish their own identities. And they're trying on new hats and they do new things. And sometimes I feel like some of these things are what we parents have been told to look out for surrounding depressive episodes, this kind of pulling away, wanting to isolate, say, how do we, I guess this is a little bit of a selfish question, but that's why you start a podcast, to answer your own questions. But how do we know the difference between a kid who is going through some expected developmental flexing, if you will, and one that might be depressed?
I think that the most critical thing for parents to keep an eye on is the level of impairment. How much are those symptoms getting in the way of a child engaging with life and being successful in it? And so you're absolutely right that depression is a very normal human experience, and very likely going through adolescence, a child is going to experience depression at various times and various stages. However, the time parents should be concerned is, are these depressive feelings affecting eating habits? Are they affecting sleeping habits? So, kind of those biological processes, or are the symptoms or experiences of depression getting in the way of the child having fun with friends, engaging in kind of normal, healthy activities? Are they not doing the things that they used to enjoy? Those kinds of things, and especially important is the child having serious thoughts about not living anymore? Is the
Mm, mhm.
burden of that kind of depressive experience so great that they're thinking about, like, they don't want their life anymore? And this I do have to differentiate it from. Kids will say all the time, like, I don't want to live anymore, I can't take it anymore, that kind of thing. And kind of being able to tell the difference between an expression and is this something a child is really considering, is a question parents should ask. But also they can take that opportunity to have conversations with professionals in their life.
Mhm.
A lot of the work that I do is in primary care pediatrics, and so I work really closely with children's physicians who have known the child their whole life and have done a really wonderful job developing relationships with kids and families.
Okay. So let's talk more about relationships. And I want to get into some chatbot type stuff after this
Yes.
break. We love what we do, and we wouldn't be able to do it without the generous donations provided by our listeners and followers. We want to extend special thanks to the Doctors Petty for their unwavering support of the podcast and organization. If you'd like to make a difference and contribute to the education and empowerment of families building their healthiest screen habits, please go to healthyscreenhabits.org find the Take Action tab and scroll down and click the donate button. 100% of your donation will be used to spread awareness and bring families the tools they need to develop healthy screen habits. I'm speaking with Dr. Ashley Harlow from Children's Nebraska in Omaha. So I have never been to your fine state. I picture very cold winters because because I read Laura Ingalls Wilder and I know about the Midwest. but very beautiful other seasons. What sort of recreation is big in Nebraska?
I have the benefit of living in Omaha, which is a city of about 500,000.
Oh,
And
okay.
so we have a fabulous zoo and we have a fabulous children's museum, and the College World Series comes here in the summertime. There's a lot, and of course, college football is very big. We love our Huskers here. And so there's much more to do than folks attribute to a flyover state.
So it's talking more about recreation, sort of another thing that our kids are up against is this concept that I've been described to by young adults in my life and teens is this sort of social wasteland that comes for kids who have grown up in low tech families or those who are not interested in spending a whole lot of time online. And there's this disconnection, even amongst kids and teens who are trying to find someone to connect to. So this can kind of funnel people, even who are not intending to be there. It funnels them into spending time on social media or a lot of online gaming. Do you have any tips on how to balance this, both from the parent's perspective as well as for someone who is, struggling to find their own way?
It's really interesting that you bring this up because I spend a chunk of my clinical time working in a local high school. And I see exactly what you're talking about, like families who have
Mm-hmm.
worked really hard to limit screen time access, smartphones, social media, those kinds of things. And you're absolutely right, because it creates a situation where almost everyone else is doing kind of the social media thing, and kids are struggling to connect. And I would have probably a couple of suggestions, both for parents and for kids. On the parent side of things, I think it's really important to fill those voids with keeping your child involved in a range of activities. And I think I think this is an idea that is much easier discussed than implemented, but making sure that there's balance in the child's life. And
Mm-hmm.
so balance in terms of sports activities, if they're physically inclined, or dance, or those kinds of things, but also are they involved in youth groups and religious or spiritual organizations? Are they finding other ways to engage? What is it, IRL? In real life with with
Mm-hmm.
with people to kind of buttress the social opportunities that aren't happening on social media. At the same time, it's I surprise myself as I'm saying this, but I think that there are also opportunities for parents to kind of coach kids in how to use social media in positive ways to build
Mm-hmm.
community around that. I think that there are a number of kids that I've worked with who are really socially anxious and aren't engaged on social media, and we'll actually bring different kinds of social media into session and kind of walk through the ways to use Instagram to connect, or the ways to use
Mm.
Discord to connect in positive ways. And it's in a lot of ways it's sort of like relationship coaching that would happen with building friendships in real life or building relationships in real life, but how to use social media in positive ways, and also how to avoid some of the pitfalls that can happen when they use social media.
Mm-hmm. We have a presentation that is a four-part stepping into social media type thing that we take parents through, and it sounds very similar to what you're
Mhm.
talking about as far as how to introduce social media so that it's not this kind of classic case of forbidden fruit, you know.
Mhm.
So, but to use it as a tool and not the toy aspect or the I don't know, a replacement for connection. But
Absolutely right. And I think that I mean, and it's hard because those kids who haven't had social media, it's almost like there's a huge sort of secret world that they're not a part of. And
right.
it can be really isolating.
Yeah.
And at least in terms of the ways the pendulum has swung, it is such an integral part of high school experiences that so
Yeah.
much is happening on social media that they are not a part of. And not, it's obviously it's not all good and it's not all bad, but it really does leave kids feeling disconnected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, and what we know about that disconnected feeling and that, that the continual want to be online was that it was manufactured, right?
Mhm.
It's,
Yes,
it was very much developed and designed by sort of hacking the human brain and manipulating dopamine output. And so much so that app developers created something that they call the attention economy, meaning the longer they can keep your attention, the more money they will make. So,
yes.
those of us in digital wellness used to advise parents to help insulate their kids from this sort of dopamine hack by one, teaching them about neurotransmitters, about dopamine, et cetera, but also kind of like really leaning in to those other feel good neurotransmitters like oxytocin by, cuddling, giving hugs, endorphins through exercise. But recently, there's kind of been this new kid on the block. It's all over the news. I'm referring specifically to character AI and the technology of chatbots. And I am very concerned about kids and teens forming these online relationships with chatbots, and they have online, they have chatbot therapists, and there's a lot of free platforms that are dispensing advice through chatbots. And most recently we even learned on the news about a 14-year-old boy in Florida who unalived himself when he was encouraged by a chatbot to join her. And I have a couple of questions. One, are you familiar with character AI? Like, is this something that has entered your realm already?
It has not. And so I am familiar only with it through the reading that I have done. It has not come up in sessions and parents haven't asked about it yet. But after the research that I've done, I am similarly concerned, I would say.
Okay. Okay. Well, I thank you for validating my concern, because my concern is that they've gone after the attention economy and now they're going after something that I'm referring to as like the connection economy, where
Mhm.
people are so lonely, they are looking for connection and they are finding it, in this mirror of algorithmic chatbot. So, do you have any I'm looking to learn along with everyone else. Do you have any recommendations about what we can do to insulate our kids from looking for connection from a robot?
You know, I think that this is it's a complicated domain and a complicated question
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like also coming from a state like Nebraska, I can certainly recognize that there are a lot of lonely, vulnerable, isolated kids in our kind of rural state who are looking
Mm.
for connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that connection has been kind of sort of possible over social media and some kinds of ways to connect with larger communities. And so if they're in a place where they don't have the human resources around them to form that connection, I can see where this character AI could step in and provide some very sort of basic engagement and opportunities for connection and communication and those sorts of things. And so
Mm-hmm.
I don't I don't necessarily want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say like that doesn't have any place and it's all risk. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think that there are potential benefits in the development of this technology. I'm worried that this development is happening with kids who
Mm-hmm.
might be in a more vulnerable and less developed place than an adult to be able to put the brakes on and say, wait a minute, you're not real. I can't end my life and meet you somewhere. Right? Like the sort of going back to the story that you told. And so I think that the approach parents can take to this is likely very similar to the approach with social media, that there's a lot of education and there's a lot of focus on differentiating what is a in real life relationship and experience and what is an online experience.
Yeah, but okay, so true confession, I went into character AI and logged myself as a 15-year-old girl, okay, as a little social experiment, and very quickly and by very quickly I'm talking about like within 4 interactions, it took a highly sexualized turn, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So there was something that I thought was going to be like career oriented. The verbiage describing this particular character was
Mm-hmm.
career oriented. It was very definitely 50 Shades of Grey adjacent. Okay. I also went into another one that was kind of like a my AI assistant kind of a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it almost started arguing with me. So when I was telling it, I thought you were going to be a guy. And it was like, why do you think that? And I was like, because you were created by, and it had the app developer, it had the character developer's name, and it was a male name. And they were like, this is true. I am divide, and I said, I would have thought that it was a guy's voice. And this person was like, not see, even me, I mean, I'm like a 53-year-old, to use the colloquialism, grown ass woman. i mean i mean mom of two young adults, and I'm even referring to the chat bot as this person, and it's not a person. I mean, it was an AI robot, I recognize that, but started arguing with me about how my human ears could not differentiate the sounds and tones that they knew to be true, and they most definitely sounded like a human male. And I'm here to tell you it was a lady's voice. I'm like, so it is I can see how I can see where the confusion comes, is what I'm saying, for kids. And I'm very
Well,
concerned.
hmm well, and it seems like the experience you're describing is identifying just another layer of risk, that
Yeah.
this is such new technology that
Hmm.
the AI is learning and it's moving I mean, especially in terms of like the sexualized elements, like moving the relationship very quickly to either what it thinks the user wants or what it thinks is intimacy in a human relationship, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
it's clumsy and inaccurate, and it also seems like wildly inappropriate, like that you stumbled into
Right.
a chat room full of bot predators.
Yeah, no, and like I said, I intentionally created an underage account. I intentionally limited my responses to between 5 and 6 words, to just like, to be very kind of teen-ish and not provide a lot of information to see where this would go.
Sure.
And the response that it would fire back at me was a paragraph or two with very explicit, they it's almost like you're getting inserted into a book. I found it to be very unsettling, and I understand how uh, anyone who is feeling lonely would feel as though there was a connection with
Mhm.
this bot on the other side. I think your advice of I guess just continuing to talk to our kids about it. I have found that the phrase in real life can be a little dismissive to our
Mm.
young adults and teens, because their online life and their offline life have merged and they're the same. And when I talk to parents, when I'm doing parent education, I'll say, in recognition of this, recognize that relationships are currency to teens. I mean, that's a very it's kind of appropriate. They're in that phase of their life where
Mhm.
they're figuring out how relationships work. They are a very important part. So they're equivalent of, like, say, currency for us being adults. And if we are to make that analogy, I encourage you right now to check your online banking accounts. And if you were to find that those had been zeroed out in the past 2.5 hours, you would have a very real offline reaction to
Mhm.
an online occurrence. I talk to parents about using the terms online and offline rather
Okay.
than in real life, because it feels the it feels like that real life term is starting to kind of drive a wedge into
Mhm.
that generational separation.
hmm I really appreciate that feedback, and I couldn't agree with more. And so I think I had been using it in therapy, but kind of came to the same realization that you're describing, that it has a
Mm,
really kind of dismissive or invalidating element to it. One thing
interesting.
I wanted to turn to as well, and what you were saying as far as guidelines for parents around the character AI, I
Mm-hmm.
think that kind of the structure of the approach that I would likely talk to parents about would be very similar to what I talk with them about in terms of social media, in terms of how you kind of sort of educate kids so that they understand that they're interacting with a software package
Okay.
and and not interacting with another human being. And the other thing I wonder about too is how you model and how you engage as an adult with these kind of chatbots, and really sitting down and showing kids that in some ways, at least in my read of this it felt a little bit similar to kind of an entertaining experience rather than having an expectation that this is sort of an authentic human connection. And so thinking about it that way can also be helpful. That
Okay.
that like the experience that you're having with the chatbot is maybe similar to how you might engage with a movie. Like you can have
Okay.
an emotional experience with a movie, right? And the characters that are being depicted on the screen.
Uh-huh.
And like that is a real emotional experience. And it's not an authentic human interaction that you're having with a person sitting next to you or a
Yeah.
person on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And I
really like that a lot. Yeah.
because that can create a certain degree of separation and put this experience in a category that
Mm-hmm.
the child doesn't believe like this is a thing that like it doesn't necessarily generalize, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that you can have an experience with the chatbot and that experience with the chatbot is not going to be the same as an interaction you have with a student that's sitting next to you in a classroom or in the lunchroom or on the soccer field.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, I like that. I like that kind of trying to categorically organize it into a different
Mm-hmm.
section of, like you said, validating that the emotions you feel when you're watching a movie are very much emotions that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
So, but putting it more in that category. I like that a lot. Thank you. So, we have to take a short break, but when we come back, I am going to ask Dr. Harlow for his healthy screen habit.
Diving into the world of smartphones can be a wild ride for kids and parents alike. Whether your child is getting their first smartphone or has had one for a while, chances are they're still figuring out the do's and don'ts of using a smartphone wisely. Our book is here to help. Healthy Screen Habits for Tweens and Teens, a training workbook to help you use your phone wisely, is the tool your child needs to navigate life in the digital world. From tackling poor phone etiquette to addressing social media anxieties and online safety concerns, we have your child covered. Written especially for adolescents, we've put together all the information, tips, hacks, and rules to ensure that your child's phone is a useful tool that they control, not the other way around. We explain the whys behind the rules of phone use. We show your child the possible traps and dangers to watch out for, how to prevent them, and how to fix them if your child has made a mistake. We give your child the 5 core healthy screen habits to use daily, protecting them from some of the worst mistakes tweens and teens make while using their phones. This workbook will teach your child how to use their phone as a tool to help them do great things in their one amazing life, and it will make your life so much easier at the same time. Packed with colorful graphics and easy to read content, this resource is a game changer for kids. Don't miss out. Buy your copy of Healthy Screen Habits for Tweens and Teens on Amazon.com today.
I'm speaking with Dr. Ashley Harlow from Children's Nebraska. And now, on every episode of the Healthy Screen Habits podcast, I ask my guests for a healthy screen habit. This is going to be a tip or takeaway that listeners can put into practice in their own home. Do you have any for us today?
Absolutely. In fact, I am going to cheat a little bit and maybe give 2 if I could, because I like to have a hard and fast tip and then kind of a more, sort of flexible or kind of think space sort of tip. And so in terms of like the hard and fast healthy screen tip is to start early and to build a smartphone pact with your kids' friends' parents. That you start talking about technology use and social media use and come together around when that is going to start for your kids. Because if it is a loose confederation of parents and everybody has a different policy and kids are starting to get phones at 7 years old or 10 years old, you don't want your child stuck out as the only one who doesn't have it. And there's going to be pressure to conform to what's going on in your child's social circle rather than what's driven by your values and your desire to keep your child safe. And so building those relationships with other parents and having conversations early and kind of making sure that those conversations are informed by your values is really, really important.
So
that's the hard and fast.
Yeah, sort of building your tribe.
Exactly right. And then the other kind of healthy screen habit I would have is to keep in the back of your mind that no family is perfect. Kids will use screens too much sometimes, and other times you might be too restrictive. And the real goal is balance and be ready to forgive yourself and forgive your kids when they sneak their devices behind your back. But having a lot of kind of forgiveness and grace in this process will be good for everyone involved.
I could not agree more. And recognizing that these things were never designed to be put down. It's when you start learning kind of the science behind it, you understand, become a lot more, at least for myself, I know I became a lot more compassionate with understanding why it was so compelling for my kids to be on their devices or anything else. So, and starting conversations with that as well. So
yes, I think that we're all figuring this out as we go, and we're all in it together.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. You can find a complete transcript of this show as well as a link to Children's Nebraska by visiting the show notes of this episode. You do this by going to healthyscreenhabits.org, click the podcast button, and scroll to find this episode. Dr. Harlow, thank you so much for being here today and for working so hard.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And I just thank you for working so hard to keep families connected offline.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was a pleasure to get to talk through it.
For more information, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Healthy Screen Habits. Make sure to visit our website, healthyscreenhabits.org, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. It's free, it's fun, and you get a healthy new screen habit each week. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate you giving us a quick rating. It really does help other people find us and spread the word of healthy screen habits. Or if you'd simply like to tell a friend, we'd love that too. I so appreciate you spending your time with me this week, and I look forward to learning more healthy habits together.